Welcome to Insights in Business. I'm Mary Ruth Snyder, the Executive Director for the Campbell River and District Chamber of Commerce. Here today, we are coming to you live on tape from the Shaw Spotlight Studio on Rob Run Road in Campbell River. And our very special guest today is Dr. Lisa Domae, the President of North Island College. Welcome.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. I'm delighted to be here.
So we usually ease into the interviews with a little bit of background information, because one of the things that we hear from our viewers is that they find it really interesting to learn about people's journeys. So we are going to begin way back at the beginning, and if you could share with us where it was you were born and raised.
Sure, well hopefully that's not way back. I was born in Vancouver, BC, and that's where I was born and raised, and I stayed there until I completed my undergraduate degree at UBC.
Okay, so you did all of your schooling in Vancouver. Which part of Vancouver were you in?
I was born in Richmond, actually. My parents are actually still living in the house that they married in, so well over 50 years now.
Awesome.
And so I did all of my secondary schooling in Richmond and then went and did my undergraduate at UBC down the road.
Now, when you went to UBC, what was your undergraduate degree in?
I have a Bachelor in Arts in Political Science and Sociology.
Okay. And when you carried on to did you go into working at that point, or did you continue on to do your graduate work?
Interestingly enough, in my first year of university, my mom and dad said, you need to get a job. So I thought, I'm going to have another summer at Kits Beach. And they're like, probably not. So actually it was my mom who encouraged me to apply to be a part-time worker at the local college, which was Kwantlen College down the road. So I was very lucky to get a job there, and I was working there while I did my undergraduate degree. And when I graduated, they offered me a full-time position. So I did that for a number of years. And then I always knew that I wanted to go back and do graduate work. So I actually went to Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and did a master's degree, finished that, and moved to Kamloops to work at what's now the university, or what was then the University College of the Cariboo, but is now Thompson Rivers University. And I worked there for a couple of years when then one day I got a call, and it was from a colleague of mine who worked at NIC, and she said, I'm moving on. And so I've been asked to help try and identify people who might replace me. Would you be interested in? And I thought, Vancouver Island? Absolutely. I had been in the interior and had enjoyed it, but really love the West Coast, born and raised, and so jumped at the chance to come to the island and have been here ever since.
Awesome. Now, when you were at Queen's, what was your master's in?
My master's is in urban and regional planning in human services.
Okay, and then your doctorate from what is now Thompson Rivers, what was that
No,
in?
my doctorate is actually from the University of Victoria.
Oh, okay.
And it's in geography.
Wow, you really studied the entire spectrum.
I did, yeah. Lifelong learning.
Did you have a favorite?
Hard to say. I really probably enjoyed and appreciated most my doctorate work in geography because I had life experience. I had, used the learnings that I had done as a planner. I had become a registered professional planner in the interim. And also, the older you get, I think the more you appreciate the opportunities that education brings to you, and I definitely found that for myself.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, when you were at Thompson Rivers, were you studying or working?
I was working.
You were working?
Yeah, I was working there.
And what was it you were doing for them?
I was actually working for the vice president academic at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, doing a whole bunch of different things. I ran their summer school program. I worked with faculty on, determining and staffing which programs were going to be offered. I did research about the institution. The early days of what we know as enrollment planning. I did all sorts of things.
At what point did you decide to do the doctorate in geography?
In 2005, not 2005, in 2005 my child was born, and I'd always known that I'd wanted to do my PhD. And I decided that when he was ready to go to kindergarten, so about 5 years later, that we would go back to school. We would go to school together. So he started kindergarten in Comox at Rob Road, and I started my PhD that same year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, what a fascinating story. Now, is there an individual that you remember or that stands out for you that impacted your learning career? And we can go back as far as kindergarten. Like, is there a teacher that stands out that kind of really had an impact on you?
That's a really good question. You know, I think I've mostly been impacted by the people around me as opposed to maybe just one special person. Certainly I would credit, you know, my mom for it making education a priority for me and our family. And so I think my desire to keep going in school is a large part because of her. Certainly, there have been lots of people who have provided me with the benefit of their own experiences, and I've tried to be a learner all my life, so to learn from what others have done and what might be useful for me and what might work for me, and to hear how people do things differently than I might have thought of doing it, and to learn from that. And there's always special people, many special people, not just one. So I think about people, friends in university who really showed me, you know, how to be successful at university. I remember a particular friend who, you know, spent time with me in the library and showed me, you know, how you really do this. I think about mentors who were previous presidents of the college who really said, you know, you really ought to consider doing more for the college. Certainly every president that I've had the opportunity to work with at NIC has been supportive of that. Lots of different people, lots of great influences in my life. Friends, family, mentors. Yeah, a community. I'm the product of a community.
What a wonderful way to look at that and to present that and to carry that with you. Does that inform how you now interact with your staff and the students and the community at large?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I think one of the most incredible things about NIC is that it is a community. In fact, we sat down today. I had the privilege of chatting with two NIC students who are on their way to becoming a marine biologist, and the other one is on his way to becoming a doctor. And they really talked about the community of support that NIC provides, that it's a number of people who are there, who know your name, who know what you're interested in, who will support you when you're doing well, and are also there for when you have some challenges. And that community of support is incredible. And so I heard about it from the students this morning, and I actually just had lunch with two faculty who are in our nursing program at Campbell River, and they were talking to me about some of the challenges that students are facing right now with the high costs of gas and the high costs of food, and what we could do as a community to support students right now. And so it's that community that makes NIC so incredibly special, right? The community we have on campus and the community that we share with the people and places where we live, and that makes us unique.
How would you describe the community support that you have witnessed over the last, how long have you been with NIC?
Over 20 years now.
20 years now.
2-year plan on my second decade.
Yeah. How would you describe that community support in comparison to maybe your experience at some of the other schools that you've had the privilege to work for?
Okay, well, where would I start? First of all, I would say one of the beauties of NIC is that all our learning spaces are intimate. And I don't know if you know this, Mary Ruth, I think you do. We began in 1975 as a distance education institution, so we had no campuses. In fact, we didn't have any campuses really until the 90s. And so our culture, our ethic was really built on that one-to-one learning relationship between a faculty member and their student. And it's that culture of relationships that is everything to who we are now.
Okay.
So that is in everybody's ethic about how they interact with a student, how they work with students, how they support students. It comes into how our NIC Foundation, which we're really proud to have you serve on, thinks about how we can support students financially. I think I cannot imagine an institution that's more student-centered than NIC, and it's all because of the faculty and staff and people like you who are committed to that experience for students.
Now, we recently had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Diane Nogler, and one of the stats that she shared was that NIC covers 80,000 square kilometers.
Yes.
That's an enormous area.
It's a very enormous area. So it goes from just about Bamfield all the way to the very top of Vancouver Island and inclusion of the Central Coast from about just north of Powell River all the way to Bella Bella.
Wow. How would you describe the challenge of servicing that entire area, and how is NIC meeting those challenges?
So the big, incredible aspect of the region that we have the privilege to serve is that we are honored to operate on the traditional and unceded territories of 35 First Nations, and who are spread across that 80,000 square kilometers. 60% of the nations and the communities that we serve are only accessible by float plane, dirt road, or boat. And they tend to be not huge centers of population. So our challenge is how do we provide relevant and meaningful and, most importantly, accessible education for each of these very diverse communities. And that's our challenge. And we do that by working in partnership with communities, by being Indigenous-led. The college has a 35-member Indigenous Education Council. We've had that for over 15 years.
Wow.
Representatives of each of the 35 First Nations, and they guide us, and we have made a commitment to our first indigenization plan, which is called Working Together, and made a commitment to Indigenous-led learning. So we work in partnership with community and are led by them. We also work very hard to be in community, to sit at industry tables, to be connected to councils, to be connected to school boards, to be connected to employers, to be connected to chambers, to hear what's happening in communities and how we can support the education and training needs of the people who are here. So our beauty is our diversity, but diversity is also how we meet the needs of these diverse communities can also be a challenge, especially when it's over such a large region, right? So you'll see us, we do a lot of traveling, we have a lot of mobile trailers, we try our very best to actually go and provide education and training to people where they live.
Okay. Now, in terms of the actual campuses that NIC has grown to have, run down the list of where those are located now.
Sure. NIC operates 4 campuses. We have a campus here in Campbell River. We also have one in the Comox Valley. We have a 3rd in Port Alberni at 2 different sites. We have a 4th in Port Harley, Mi-Alaquila, and we operate a learning center in Yaklulit. And that's the actual physical campuses or centers that we operate. And as I said, we do much by going out and actually operating instruction, offering instruction actually in Indigenous and other small communities.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that when NIC was founded in 1975, it was founded as a distance education learning experiment.
Yeah, they called it an experiment.
So where are you still identified as a distance ed school, even though you've grown to have campuses?
We've moved, now that we've consolidated into campuses, we are like your traditional community college. What we are, where we're different and where I think we're special is that we've maintained that real sense of going out into communities and providing education that's relevant to each of those communities, whether what Gold River might need is very different what Zavelis might need, which is might different from what the Huayet First Nation might need. And so it's working closely in partnerships with communities to provide relevant education as close to home as possible.
Now, one of the really fascinating developments over the last few years, especially with NIC, and I think you're one of the leading colleges in this area, is what we are now calling micro-credentialing. So can you explain what that is to our viewers?
Sure. Micro-credentials are basically short-term, usually short-term programming. So the length kind of ranges anywhere from 8 weeks to usually a couple of months. And usually it focuses on a particular skill or knowledge base that you need that will support something specific to a job or the labor market. So I'll give an example of one of the very first micro-credentials that NIC started offering a number of years ago, which was medical office terminology. So lots of healthcare facilities, hospitals need people who can transcribe, doctors' notes and need to understand medical office terminology. And so we offered that as a micro-credential, and that allowed people to go and work for Island Health in short term. But it also, one of the really special things about NIC's micro-credentials, could be part of a larger office administration credential for those students who wanted to go on. So they're short pieces of learning that can augment someone who already has education and training and just needs a little bit something more specific, or it can be an entry point into a credential for someone who doesn't have it. So another example of a micro-credential like that might be something around the environment that we're currently doing. You could get a specific piece of knowledge about something you might want to do, and you can add that on to something you already have.
Oh, okay. And have you found those micro-credentials to be popular amongst the students?
They've been incredibly popular, the micro-credentials. Often because they're offered in a very flexible format so that students can take them in short pieces and can often do the theory online and then come together for applied work. So an example of that is we work in really great partnership with the North Island Film Commission and offer a series of micro-credentials in order for people to access jobs in the burgeoning film industry here in British Columbia. So a whole range of film-related micro-credentials.
Now, what do you feel that the NIC learned from the pandemic around education delivery?
Oh, the lessons of the pandemic we could talk about for hours, Mary Ruth. So let me talk to you about the ones that I think are most important. Okay. I think the ones that I think we've all heard about how education institutions made the flip from teaching in person to teaching online and what that was like for students. And I think that's a really important conversation for us to be having, because we know that students need that flexibility in learning. So NIC has made a commitment to offer remote education for students who need it. But also, I think the biggest part of that is how do you support students in that learning environment? And I think the biggest lesson of the pandemic for us is our ability to support students with mental health supports, with financial supports that enable them to start and or complete their studies. And so one of the pieces that we're working on now is a digital services strategy, so how we can provide services to students who may not be able to attend the campus frequently, and to ensure that students have the supports they need in order to be successful in the program that they're choosing.
Awesome. Do you feel that NIC was well situated to embrace the virtual learning because you have a foundation of being a distance learning facility?
Yes, I think to some extent that's the case. Of course, how we started in 1975 with paper-based courses is very different, to what we do that's technologically enabled now. But what I think was really the key to our success was really the commitment of faculty to ensure their students were successful and putting the time in to make sure that their courses were accessible and well done online. And it's that commitment of the NIC faculty that made those successes possible. I mean, I've talked to biology instructors who, audio videotaped all of their labs, and just the extraordinary commitment of faculty is what helped make NIC successful through the pandemic.
Okay. You mentioned that you had lunch today with some of the faculty that were talking about some of the challenges that students are facing right now, and it's really just about the everyday challenges that a lot of people in Canada are having right now. And how is it that the NIC Foundation positioned to help students in those situations?
One of the wonderful things about the NIC Foundation, which started in 1991, is that it's always been incredibly student-focused. So many foundations assist, post-secondary institutions with building buildings,
Right.
with doing fundraising for new equipment and those kinds of things. And those things NIC definitely needs support with. However, the NIC Foundation spends the most of its time on raising funds that go directly into the hands of students. And
Okay.
where I think our foundation is breaking some new ground is breaking out of the sort of the traditional models of like giving a person a scholarship or a bursary for a certain length of time, but being more innovative and understanding that, you know, trade students are 8-week students. They're apprentices who are often got a home in Port McNeill, but also driving to Comox and paying either a rent or a mortgage in 2 places, and they have young children. So we're really thinking out of the box, and how do we support the flexible ways that students are taking programming now and the fullness of their lives that need to be supported. And
Okay.
you know, the big one we hear right now as how students need support, you know, gas money, food
okay.
money, right? It's the basics, Mary Ruth.
And
It's
so,
the everyday life.
so there's a mechanism in place for a student that comes to like 3 weeks in the month and realizing that they are literally out of cash.
Yes, and if
And they
there's
can come
one
to
thing
you.
I could leave you with students with is that people don't like to ask for help. You know, I think it's our general human nature not to ask for help. And what we want them to do is to come to Student Services and share their situation. And let us provide the services that we have in place for you. And that it can be financial support, short-term, emergency financial support. And students always tell me, I'm not having an emergency. And that's, your definition of emergency and mine might be different. But if you tell me you haven't eaten for a week and neither have your kids, or you've come to school today and you haven't eaten, to me that's an emergency. So I hope you'll trust us enough to come into Student Services and share that, and we'll be able to
Right.
connect you with some resources that are provided or linked through the foundation that will get you through,
Okay. And
or
so,
help get you through for sure.
yes, and so the foundation has been in place since 1991. And would you say that you've seen the foundation grow because of the community support in all the communities over that time period to where the foundation is now?
Absolutely. So I think this year, and I won't quote the exact number, I think the foundation has enabled the highest amount of financial support to students in its history.
Okay.
And that we are certainly lucky that as more students have an NIC experience, as more community members have an NIC experience, they're remembering us and making a commitment to donate or planning, you know, end of life and putting NIC in that equation. So the more we do with community, the more community wants to support the students that come through.
Okay. Now, one of the ways that NIC is going to be helping students in the future is you are about to undertake a housing project
Yes.
on the Comox Valley campus. So tell us about the timeline for that.
Okay, well, we're hoping to be on track to open 217 beds of student housing
Awesome.
in September of 2025.
Okay.
We are planning 170 or so, 69 beds of single student housing in a bunch of different configurations. You know, 4 people in a room, nano suites, single suites, in a single student housing building, and then units in a separate building of family housing for students who are family members.
Oh, okay.
When we started this project before COVID, you know, we talked to students and to understand what they needed, and we all know housing is ridiculously hard to find here on the North Island. And it can be very expensive. So we've planned these 2 facilities, but the housing is going to be so much more than that. It will include not only year-round rentals for people who need housing year-round, but there will be short-term rentals for example, like a trade student I mentioned who's coming for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And to do an apprenticeship, there will be short-term housing. We've made a commitment to indigenizing the space, so we're working very closely with Comox First Nation to ensure that we're culturally respectful and appropriate.
Okay.
There's going to be tons of gathering spaces for students to for students who aren't just living there, to use and enjoy the space. And we're hoping in a short period of time we'll be able to share, you know, what the project will be like when it's going to be built. It's very exciting.
That is wonderful news. With the other campuses, is there any long-term plan to look at housing in Campbell River and Port Alberni?
Yes. So
Okay.
We're already in sort of very early stages of planning and discussing the need for student housing here in Campbell River. And then we are also working on a new campus plan for Port Alberni that will consider whether over the long term we'll need housing at that campus as well.
Okay. If there was one or two or three things that you think that the general population needs to know about NIC that they maybe don't know, what would it be?
I think many residents of the region would be surprised at how much we offer and how diverse it is. So a person in the community might not know that we offer, you know, the first 2 years of university level programs, that we offer a Bachelor of Business Administration, that you can become a registered nurse at NIC, you can get a ticket, a Red Seal certificate in a wide variety of trades. We have the micro-credentials you talked about. We have all the programming that's in community. We have a fine arts diploma. We have a whole range of programming far beyond what I think most people are aware of. And a couple of clicks into www.nic.bc.ca will show that breadth. So I think people are always saying, oh, I didn't know I could do that at NIC, or, oh, do I have to move to X place to do that?
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case. So really, if there's something you're interested in, you should at least see if we have something that you're interested in. People are often pleasantly surprised to learn they don't have to move to the mainland to do X, Y, or Z.
And there's also Elder College? Is that what it's called? Okay.
We have Elder College. There's Elder College at several of our campuses, which is a lecture-based program that's run by a group of volunteers for the population that's about 55 and above, and they do lifelong learning, which is amazing.
Wonderful.
Another thing a lot of people don't know is we have a Joy of Lifelong Learning program. So we actually have some seats available for students who are mature learners to come in and take those courses for free.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we are out of time.
Oh, wow.
We warned you it goes fast.
It does.
And it really does. Lisa, thank you so much for coming in and joining us today. We know how busy you are, and we are thrilled to live in a community that North Island College is so immersed in Campbell River and the Comox Valley and Port Alberni, and Port Hardy and Ucluelet, and the fact that you are delivering to the 35 First Nations where they need you to deliver. I just think that's astonishing and wonderful all at the same time.
Well, thank you. It's our privilege to be able to be part of that learning journey.
And thank you so much for your time today, and we hope you will come back and talk about everything else you have going on in the future. Okay.
Thank you, Mary Ruth.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Insights in Business. Please join us again.